Welcome, everyone. Another great video. We're going to look at expectations versus reality in retirement. Use a little bit of data to influence our conversation. We'll start with the source of that data. Ontario Securities Commission, Ipsos, they did a survey, 1,500 Canadians, all of them over the age of 50, big chunk retired, smaller portion not retired. That's really the source of the data here, Kevin. We're going to get right into the details. The first question we're going to talk about, they asked folks this question, said, hey, what led you to retire? Pick all the options that are applicable. And I'll show you what people came up with here. You can see it on the screen. Is more or less what you thought for retirement?
Yeah, I would say it is. And again, let's remember, you can pick as many as you want, because if you take those numbers, they do not add up to 100%. That is vastly over 100%. So as we can see, there's more than one reason a lot of people retire. And yeah, you've reached the age you want to enjoy life, you want to travel. All three of those could be included for anybody at that point in time. So it is pretty much where you want to get to that scenario where, why am I retiring? Well, I want to, it was time, the whole 9 yards that goes on with that. So these things, family and friends, the whole bit, they are there. I mean, one that you have to look at the bottom is probably other as well as a fairly large thing. Because maybe there's other circumstances beyond that.
Exactly. So more or less in line with what we thought, the why people would retire. Some of the options on there that could be a little more of a surprise, like felt like I could not perform the essential duties of my job. That was 9%. People offered a package to retire, so maybe they got an incentive. 12% kind of left on saying, hey, I'm taking that extra financial package, whatever it was.
Yes.
Travel more is a big one, and I imagine enjoy life more. Travel is probably part of that. Those two could likely be linked, so it could be a large piece there between the two. And that leads us to this next portion where they asked the retirees or the pre-retirees, the folks not yet retired, said, hey, what are you planning on doing in retirement? And then they asked the retired group, said, what are you doing in retirement? So you have kind of the expectations versus the reality here. And lo and behold, there were a couple of gaps when that happened. I mean, there were some similarities for sure, but there were a couple of big gaps. And those are the ones that are bolded on the screen.
Yeah, exactly. And as you mentioned, spending time with friends and family, spending time on hobbies, and that makes sense whether you're retired or you're not retired. But you're right. The big gaps come in traveling for leisure, things along the lines of working part-time, if you're dealing with it, or eating habits. I mean, again, now the travel one, I think, has sort of a variety of different things. Maybe you find that travel is a little more expensive than you planned in retirement, so that may be an option. Or the other factor is that it depends on when you're talking about a retiree. Are we talking an early 60s retiree? Are we talking somebody in their 80s that's a retiree that can deal with that? And again, that's part of the spending time out of country and property I own scenario, another big gap there. And it's always amazing that, it takes until you hit retirement before you really start eating healthy. I mean, that's always a big factor, right? Maybe we should be doing it now, but sometimes a burger is just hard to pass up no matter whether it's good for me or not.
Yeah, and you might look at that and say, hey, well, I thought I'd be traveling, maybe working part-time, and lo and behold, in retirement, less travel, less work part-time, more healthy eating. Is that how reality is? And like you mentioned, there's probably some nuance here that's not being captured, which is important to mention, and that it has to do with the fact that retirement, it's a long time. It's not a couple of years. It could be decades, and there's different phases to retirement. We've talked about this before. I'll pull it up on the screen. You can see kind of 5 very broad phases. This is the pre-retirement, your accumulation, your pre-retirement phase, and then 3 during retirement, the green, blue, and purple there, the active, passive, and supportive. So depending on which phase of retirement you're in, you can very much determine how you answer these questions. And they didn't ask certain groups. They just asked all the retirees, whether you're 82, 62, or somewhere in between. And lo and behold, you get a bit of a gap. I imagine if they asked just that active retiree, folks that just retired a year or two ago, well, their activities will probably line up pretty closely with what they're planning to do. And then in the latter stages of retirement, you could see some differences there. Will that make a little more sense, Kevin?
Yeah, I guess reality should be where they divide this up. You should have the pre-retirees, then you should have the 3 phases of retirees, because you're right. That's probably where you're getting those big gaps and differences is, pre or early retirement is going to be a lot different than late retirement as to what your travel goals look like. And who knows, that may be a very big factor in what your healthy eating goals are going to be, and definitely in your part-time work. I mean, I don't know about you, but at 80, I'm probably not doing that Walmart greeter thing just to be able to do something. So
maybe in the early part of retirement, do a bit of part-time work, and maybe that pays for the travel. Maybe the two are linked, and then you get to the middle or latter retirement is no longer the case. So perhaps expectation versus reality is more just a factor of the phases of retirement. We talk about retirement all the time. If you got a question about retirement, or really anything else in the financial world, we'd love to hear from you. Bottom of the screen there, chatwithclintonkevin.com. Part of our website, fill in the form, comes right to us. We always love the questions, so please do reach out. Next piece we'll look at here, again, expectation versus reality. The standard of living, Kevin. They asked the retirees, what is your standard of living now compared to before? Is it better? Is it worse? Is it about the same? I'll pull the results up on the screen here. Is this what you thought it would be?
Well, it's a little bit different, but yeah, I mean, normally you would expect that hopefully you've planned for what's going on and things are beaten there. But yeah, what we're seeing basically here is almost a third, a third, a third divided. So there's a third of retirees that think it's not as good as it should be. There's a third that think it's better. And then, about 40% plus are thinking that, yeah, it's pretty much the same as what I expected. So again, that third, a third, a third is really sort of the scenario. And it could be a variety of different reasons for why you're getting, the positive or the negative above about the same.
Yeah, and a little bit of nuance here. They broke down even further that retired category, and they said, okay, of the retirees that are saying it's worse, are there groups that are selecting that option more frequently? And it was those with lower household income. So if you're retired with a household income of below 40,000, according to the survey, more of those folks, 43%, said it was worse. Same with smaller investment portfolio. Retired with less than 50,000 in your portfolio. 45% of that group said it was worse, their standard of living. So if you had lower income and smaller portfolio, on the flip side, those that said it was better to a greater degree, those in retirement longer. So if you've been retired 20 years plus, a third of that group said, hey, I'm doing better than before. And those with an employer pension plan. So I imagine employer pension plan probably means like a defined benefit plan. So you have some guaranteed income in retirement. Those are rare nowadays in Canada. But if you have one of those, according to the survey, more likely to say, hey, I'm better in retirement. That makes some sense to me. The 20 years plus, does that fit with your view of retirement?
Yeah, I think it really does. Because if you managed to go through 20 years, I mean, chances are now you may be in your 80s and things. And, life has been probably good to you at that point in time, that you're really in a better situation if you manage to survive this way. So again, the worse and the better, it does seem to say with that scenario. Those on the lower income side, maybe not as much. Those maybe on the higher income side, better than you'd planned because you may not have spent as much as you thought you might.
And we'll quickly talk about the expenses here related to that. They asked the retiree group, are the expenses higher than you thought, lower than you thought, about the same? We should mention they asked this question in 2023. That's when they collected all the data. So on the tail end of some high inflation years. So you have to bear that in mind. That's kind of the context of this survey. And it more or less kind of answers what you think it would answer. I'll pull it up here. 33% said it's actually higher than what they initially planned. 23% lower. 42% said about the same of what I thought it would be. No big change there.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're right there. And maybe that 23% lower scenario, as you mentioned, could have a lot to do with what you're dealing with for inflation or things along those lines, or whatever the budget scenarios are going to be for you going forward. So that could have a big factor going on just based on prices alone as to what's going on. But this is, 75% of people are about the same or higher, which exactly what you sort of expected just based on what you'd have going forward.
Yeah, so it covers a few of the key details there. We'll mention retirement, not a static item. It's a dynamic process. There's phases. Things are going to change, which is why you need to have a plan. You have to reflect on the budget, update the plan as things change throughout the budget or as you go through the phases of retirement, because your activity level and what you're doing and spending money on will also shift as you go through those phases. So we always have the Becker or motto of have a plan. That kind of encapsulates a lot of what's going to happen in retirement. If you like this video, we have a whole video on how much can I spend in retirement that digs into spending with a little more detail. It's on the screen somewhere. Click on that one. We'll see you again very soon.